Okay, so let's talk about covalent bonds. For this video, there are 3 learning goals that have been identified. So firstly, we're going to define what a covalent bond is. Now for me, one of the easiest ways to remember what is involved with a covalent bond is to look at the word covalent. Now I usually break up this word into 2 components, the co and the valent. Okay, so co, if you look at the prefix co and think of typical words that are associated with this or include this prefix, like cooperate or coordinate or coincide. All of these words, right, they involve something happening together with something else, or someone happening, someone doing something together with someone else. So co here equals, can be equated with together. Now valent sounds like valence, and I would add valence shells just to make the analogy clean. The valence shells are the outer shells of elements, of atoms. So what does it mean for there to be a covalent bond? Well, the definition of the covalent bond, definition of a covalent bond is a bond formed from the sharing of valence electrons, sharing of the valence electrons of 2 non-metal atoms. So key word here, key words, is sharing valence electrons. Sharing here relates to this part of the word covalent, the first part of the word covalent. So co, together, and sharing are linked. Valence electrons links to the second part of the word, the valent part. The valent part being related to valence shells. So this is our working definition for covalent bond, okay? A covalent bond is a bond formed from the sharing of the valence electrons of 2 non-metal atoms. Now the last part of this definition, the 2 non-metal atoms, is quite important, and this makes it distinct from ionic bonds, which are formed from a metal atom or a metal ion linking with a non-metal ion. So that's the first learning goal. Now the second learning goal in writing this definition has been covered. So here, consider that non-metal atoms form covalent bonds, not metals. Metals are virtually never involved in covalent bonds. At least we don't have to consider that at this level. It's non-metal atoms that we talk about. Okay? Alright, so with the third learning goal, illustrate a typical covalent bond. Let's do that. Let's go with chlorine, our good friend chlorine. Now chlorine, we'll draw the electron dot diagram for an atom of chlorine. Now chlorine would really love to gain one more electron to complete its octet. And in terms of ionic bonding, it could receive an electron from a metal, and it can form an ionic bond, an ionic compound, to obtain an octet. But in terms of covalent bond, it can also obtain an octet. So let's draw the electron dot diagram, or I'm going to draw the electrons as crosses here for another atom of chlorine. Now these two chlorine atoms, they both would really like to have one extra electron to have an octet. Now these unpaired electrons here, circle them in red. These unpaired electrons can pair up with each other to form a covalent bond. What does that look like? So it's chlorine here with its 7 electrons, and the second atom of chlorine here with its 7 electrons. They could come together, and these electrons, they can pair up to form a bonding pair of electrons. And this bonding pair of electrons is a covalent bond. And if you look at the two chlorine atoms now after the covalent bond has been formed, look at their valence electrons, you would find that for this chlorine atom, it has an octet, 8 electrons. And for this chlorine, it also has an octet, 8 electrons. 8 electrons in valence shell for each. Happy days for these chlorine atoms. So covalent bonds, they are moderately strong because of the fact that the atoms that make up the covalent bonds, they gain that they are able to form their octets, the full outer shells. So the sharing of electrons here enables that. So just to recap on what we looked at this video, we defined what a covalent bond is. That is, it is a bond formed from the sharing of the valence electrons of two non-metal atoms. Non-metal atoms being the types of elements involved in covalent bonds. So metals do not form covalent bonds. At least we don't consider that at this level. And you can see here chlorine is a type of non-metal, so two chlorine atoms, two different non-metal atoms, they can help each other form an octet by sharing their electrons. So this sharing of electrons, I will add that. And these unpaired electrons are shared. The sharing of electrons forms a bonding pair of electrons, which is what we call an covalent bond.